would actually come forward. If she would come forward and bring some remarks on behalf of the university. So Dr. Getz.
Thank you so much, Leonardo. I'm really grateful to be here at this important event, and the school is proud to be able to sponsor it. So good morning to all of you. I hope that you had a good little discussion in your breakout rooms. We didn't have a lot of time to get to know one another, but it's important to have some of that FaceTime with one another whenever we can. I want to talk to you a little bit this morning about the Salinger School of Business, and I'll start with a quote from Pope Francis. He has said, "Business is a noble vocation," and I think that's such an important thing to think about. At Loyola's Salinger School of Business and Management, we inspire and prepare students to become responsible, ethical business leaders who help their companies and communities become stronger. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are a community that recognizes the inherent value and dignity of every person. We offer top-tier graduate business programs which have been AACSB accredited in both business and accounting since 1988. Our accounting programs were recently ranked #1 in the state of Maryland by College Factual. Our Professionals MBA is a perfect fit for business professionals looking for a part-time, self-paced program. It may be completed totally online or via a blended model that includes a combination of in-person, hybrid, and online courses. The MBA offers 5 areas of specialization, from finance and marketing to management, data analytics, and interdisciplinary business. At the undergraduate level, we offer majors and concentrations in accounting, economics, finance, data analytics, international business, leadership and management, marketing, and our newest, sustainability management. We also have non-degree programs. One of the most important of those is our Leadership Essentials program, which has been offered in Howard County for many, many years. And it's led by Lori Fuchs, who is with us today. Lori, give a wave so everybody can see you. If you've got somebody in your organization who is an emerging leader, and we mean a leader in your organization and in the community, talk to Lori, because we've got a wonderful program to help them develop more and be real contributors to Howard County's future success. We have alumni all over the place. They're leaders in small and large businesses throughout Baltimore and Maryland and across the country. And our alumni actively engage with students through mentorship and networking opportunities. With these strong programs, we really prepare students to build a better world through business. And I believe that the Howard County Chamber of Commerce also supports this idea that businesses help to strengthen our communities. And today's event will, I hope, help you all build stronger businesses as well. Thank you again for the opportunity to sponsor and to say a few remarks, and I'll turn it back to you, Leonardo.
Thank you, Dr. Getz, again for joining us, and thank you for your support of the Chamber and of this particular program. And so with that, we're now here for the panel portion. And so I'm going to introduce first our moderator and then our panelists. And so is no stranger to those of you that attended our women's conference, and it is Dr. Christy Monk. And she is the owner of Christy Monk and Associates, which is an organizational development consulting firm focused on creating thriving organizations and productive and engaged individuals. She is an international speaker, best-selling author, bullying expert, and organizational leadership and development consultant. After quitting her job almost 4 years ago, she was unfulfilled and tired of taking jobs that did not align with her core values. And thus she developed the STAY model, which teaches you how to stand in your power unapologetically, take control of your thoughts and actions, access whose help you need so that you can yield to the authenticity of you. And so that is Dr. Christy Monk. Next on our panel, we have, starting with Marco Avila, who is a director and civil engineer with WSP, a global engineering firm where he provides engineering and program management services for major infrastructure projects in the public and private sector, including transit, highways, bridges, public-private partnerships, and telecommunications. He is also the CEO and founder of the Healing Hands Foundation and serves as the president and chairman of the board of the Maryland Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Since 2007, his Healing Hands Foundation has provided vital services, including surgical procedures, medical treatment, dental care, and educational support to children in under-resourced communities around the world. With the Maryland Hispanic Chamber, he helps Maryland-based Hispanic-owned businesses grow, partner together, and thrive through support, advocacy, and networking. In both contexts, Marco draws on his diverse background as a project manager, supervising engineer, translator, connector, and leader. Marco Avila. Next is Vinroy Jalai, and he is a principal with the Baltimore office of Miles and Stockbridge, where his diverse practice and experience has seen him advise clients operating in the government contracting, transportation, cybersecurity, banking, and technology industries on an array of matters, including equity and asset sales and purchases, debt offerings, and licensing transactions. And while his practice focuses on larger transactions, he also regularly helps clients with other business needs, including various forms of loan transactions, compliance with U.S. securities laws, and general commercial matters. He is a graduate of University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and has a law degree from Duke University, which I don't know who he pulls for when those two play. Lastly is, last two rather, starting with Dr. Cheryl Moore Thomas. She has her PhD in counselor education from the University of Maryland. She is an associate professor of education in the school counseling program at Loyola University. Dr. Moore Thomas has previously served as the associate dean of the School of Education, the school counseling program director, and co-director, administrator, and co-director of Loyola's College Advising Corps, and in several public school system positions. Over her professional career, Dr. Moore Thomas has published and presented in the areas of multicultural counseling competence in school counseling, cultural identity development of children and adolescents, college access counseling and accountability in school counseling programs. And then next we have Betsy Cerullo, and she is the founder of AdNet AccountNet Inc., Advocates for Workplace Excellence and Equity, which is a 8A LGBTE and WBE certified. AdNet is a management consulting firm focused on professional staffing and human capital management. Based in Baltimore City, serving government and corporate clients throughout the U.S., AdNet places small business enterprises with accounting, finance, human resources, and legal expertise. She is also the co-founder and past president of the Maryland LGBT Chamber of Commerce. Betsy serves as the Chamber's public policy chair. She also serves on the development committee for Chase Brexton Health Services. Betsy is a passionate activist pushing for equal rights for women and all diverse groups. Betsy holds a bachelor's degree in business from Catholic University and a master's degree in integrative health science from Capital University of Integrative Medicine. She is also a certified executive coach. And so with that, I'm going to now turn things over to Dr. Monk to get us started.
All right, well, thank you, Leonardo, and thank you, Dr. Kitts and Loyola University for hosting the event today. And so without further ado, I'm gonna jump right in. And my first question is going to be for everyone. So throughout our discussion, I may call on some of you specifically to answer specific questions. So just to set the stage for how we're gonna go. So to jump in, however we phase it or call it, issues of acceptance and equity has been the top of mind lately in the media, in our professional lives, and in our social circles. In your opinion, why is it so important that we have these conversations, and what should we be looking to accomplish in our dialogues? And I'll open it up to our panelists.
Well, I'll start. And first, thank you so much for having me here. I'm really grateful to be part of such an esteemed group, so I'm honored. But to answer that question, when people stay within a comfort zone, we miss out on an opportunity for growth and to expand our view of an issue. And the sadness of the multiple deaths and harm inflicted upon the Black community are events that we just can't tolerate anymore. And stopping it does not not mean we're not giving voice to travesties within other parts of humanity. We're just drawing the line in the sand that we're no longer going to be held hostage by hate. You know, if you look back to the 80s with AIDS, we declared that silence equals death, and our community was relentless for change. We exposed entities and individuals who brought harm, and our work is ongoing. But we shifted the conversations, and today same-sex marriage is legal, and for that I am so grateful, and so is my wife. So, you know, we all know that change can happen when we stay the course and are clear of the outcome and never give up. And being a white person of influence, I have an obligation to use that influence to open the minds of people who are actively and passively ignorant. So for people who enjoy and benefit from whatever privilege we have, I want you to ask yourself this question. If you changed places with a Black mother or father, how would you feel when your child goes anywhere? My wife and I have said we would be scared for our kids. So for those who are white and may not fully get the depth of this problem we face, I want you to ask yourself that question. And how would you feel?
Thank you, Betsy. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think it's particularly important for us to be having these discussions, but not for us to just kind of end at these discussions, right? Because the reality, I mean, we have to accept where we are, right? The reality is that these conversations have certainly been happening within the Black community about what's going on for certainly as long as I've been around, right? And so I think it's you know, unfortunately, the circumstances that happen present that we start thinking about it, but not think about it just from the context of, oh, some people have gotten killed, that's bad, everybody recognizing that's bad, but really to kind of dig into understanding the much deeper issues around equity and economic opportunities that have led us to the positions where police officers interact with Black communities in the ways that they do. And so for me, you know, I come to this with some, you know, optimistic skepticism, right? Because we've seen, you know, I remember I did a speech 5 years ago where we were talking about people being killed and how, you know, it's wrong and how we need to share the burden to kind of bring these things to light. And 5 years later, we're still talking about the same things. And obviously a 5-year time span is not that quick, you know, it's not that long of a time, but it's important for us to start really peeling back the onion to understand not just it's very easy for us to see somebody getting strangled and say, oh, that's bad. But think about how are you creating opportunities so 5-10 years from now that there is some of the same economic desperation that led us to some of the situations that cause for the interactions that lead to these deaths. And so just thinking, my position is really to think more about just not like the very, you know, clear, easy answer as to, oh, we feel bad about this, but let's think about the much deeper issues that are rooted in our societal framework that cause us to get to the positions that we are now.
Thank you, Vinroy. Marco? Or
Sure, if I may, yeah, I think what we need to do is continue meeting, continue talking openly, but not just talking, but also establishing policies and procedures and programs that can help, you know, and have a diverse groups and you know, in whatever industry you're in or group you're at. But I think talking openly and being able to express yourself, I think is important, because I'm sure, and personally in the past, you know, you stay quiet, you don't say anything, and no one will know what you really think about, you know, what's going on. And if you say what you really think, others will say, oh, wait a minute, I never thought of that. And thank you for saying that. And because of that, you know, something else positive will come up. And like personally on our organization, on the corporate world, we very deeply involved in putting, you know, official processes and procedures, monthly meetings, throughout the whole country. We have offices everywhere. And we think it is very important to sit down at least once a month just to talk about what's going on and how can we put together a program to make it work. So, not only talk the talk, but also walk the walk, right? Um, so yeah, we need to speak out for sure.
Thank you.
If I could just briefly add, if that's okay. First, thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this conversation. I'm so thrilled to have an opportunity to share with you today. And in thinking about that question, Dr. Monk, what really comes to mind for me is that this is all about maximizing human potential. This is about creating opportunities and a context where we can all thrive. And I certainly believe in spaces where we all thrive, where there is as much of an opportunity for me to be successful as it is for you to be successful, where there's as much of an opportunity for my child to grow and flourish and prosper as it is for your child, where your loved ones are safe as they navigate spaces as in the same way that my loved ones are safe. I think in that kind of context, we're able to meet outcomes. And those outcomes, whether we're talking about educational outcomes, health outcomes, business outcomes, nonprofit goals or outcomes of community engagement, we are more likely to meet success when each of us have those opportunities to thrive. So really the importance of these conversations in my mind are because they allow us to accomplish a sense of awareness. They develop and lead to an openness to building bridges, and building those bridges are significant because they lead to greater accomplishment of shared outcomes and goals. They allow all of us to thrive.
Well, thank you, Dr. Moore Thomas. And I think just to summarize, what I heard is that we need to continue to have the conversations, and it's important to put ourselves in the shoes of others and champion those policies and procedures that, of course, what you just stated, Dr. Moore Thomas, to maximize human potential. So to set the stage, I want to start with you. So one of the biggest issues involving diversity, equity, and inclusion is that of accountability and creating safe spaces, as you just mentioned. Many executives and managers cite the need for it, yet have no clear-cut metrics to define success or how to create safe spaces for sensitive conversations. What are your suggestions for holding people accountable and creating safe places to have difficult conversations? Dr. Moore Thomas?
Sorry so much for that technical difficulty. I had a hard time unmuting there. Thanks so much for that really important question. Accountability always starts with clarity of goals. If there's ambiguity about where we're headed, particularly where we're headed as a team, there's limited opportunity to have our team members, our organizations, our institutions meet those goals. And specifically, thinking about safe spaces, I think it's important to consider process goals, how it is, what is going to be our way of being, how it is we're going to move forward, and also those outcome goals. In terms of process goals, or how it is that we're going to move forward, and that I think is critically important. I think we have to have a commitment to listening, to sharing our stories with each other, to listening to our stories and respecting the stories without judgment, to doing the work and doing our own work and not expecting others to do our work for us. And this is critical, like when we think about the historical role that women and people of color in particular have had, as they've often carried the tax of doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work within our organizations. It is true that others have been involved in that work, but when we look at the data, historically, women and people of color have been the ones to bring the story forward, to move our institutions forward, to ask the difficult questions, to challenge and share in ways that get us to move forward. So I think in this moment in particular, as we all commit to doing our own work and seeing these as institutional aims with clarity about that where we're headed, we've laid out the process that will get us there, and we've laid out what it is that we're hoping for in terms of DEI. And just the last piece, very, very briefly, I think another important piece, particularly thinking about organizational structure, institutional structure, is to be comfortable with discomfort. Any of the change literature suggests that anytime our institutions, our organizations, even ourselves as individuals within those structures, anytime we're about to face significant change, it is uncomfortable. That is a challenging place, particularly for American society, where we have tendencies to remediate or eliminate that discomfort. There is strength that comes in struggle. As an African American woman, certainly that is the story that is very much a part of me and my legacy. But I also know that that is very much the American struggle for each and every one of us. That if we are willing to sit and wrestle in the discomfort, whether it be our own discomfort as we are processing within our families the horrific pieces that we've seen with Breonna Taylor, with all of the recent killings, whether we are making sense of the protests, whether we are trying to have those conversations with young people, whether we're thinking about the organizational shifts that we're making where diversity and equity are fuller aims for us, if we are willing to sit with each other and be and stand with each other in that struggle, we can move to greater outcomes on the other side of it in unity. And I think that's the big piece of this accountability. It's a shared marching forward with these shared goals that are focused on process, how we get there, and what it's going to look like when we get there, the outcome piece.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Well, that's a lot. And I mean, so mentioning that we all have to do our individual work. Dr. Moore Thomas, in our preparation for a discussion, you mentioned it's difficult to change institutional thinking and that one way to do it is through an equity audit. Describe what that is and how it works.
Absolutely. An equity audit is a tool that helps institutions examine and better understand structural inequities. You can think of an equity audit as an in-house research study. It allows a small group, a team of internal team members to select and define, shape, really craft a question that the team may have concerning ideas, thoughts, a hypothesis around areas of possible disparity or inequity. That team sharpens that question and then gathers existing data in reference to that question. The team works with leadership to disaggregate those data, particularly along the lines of gender, ethnicity, race, sexual orientation, other dimensions, and then notes if there is any disparity in the outcomes. We could take a look at how individuals are promoted within our organization. We could look at something like turnover rates within the organization. We could even choose to take a look at the way in which we orient individuals and welcome them into our institution or structure to see if there's any disparity in the outcomes there. Importantly, after we get those data in a summarized fashion, those data are shared with the broader community, and then there's a plan of intervention put in place. What I really love about an equity study is that it doesn't have a high price tag. It can be done with a very low economic increase. In fact, it might just be in terms of personnel and resources and hours worth of the team's time a week over several weeks that could be devoted to this sort of initiative. It creates a clear plan of intervention on the other side of the study. And most importantly, it gets beyond the programmatic pieces that are so frequent in DEI work or diversity, equity, and inclusion work, and it gets to the structural elements of an institution because it allows us to take a look at the policies and the practices that shape who and what we are as institutions. The equity audit really aims at those pieces.
Well, thank you. And I mean, when we met, well, that was the first time I heard of an equity audit. We've seen them done by outside sources, and it doesn't lend itself to give organizations the data that they are seeking in order to really make the shift towards diversity and inclusion. And as we heard earlier, one of the things around equity, pay equity, or, you know, we have salary discrepancies and things that you mentioned that the equity audit could look at. And in another of these areas is supply chain and procurement. So Marco, this question is for you. So one area of focus for your organization is to have Hispanic businesses added to the socioeconomic classes for which state procurement has goals and set-asides. Why is this important?
Well, like we all trying to be included, right? Belonging, diversity, and we feel that especially on the Hispanic community, one of the fastest growing ethnic groups in the country, 1 in 10 in Maryland, 1 in 6 in the entire country. By 2050, we're going to have a third of the population in the U.S. Are going to be Hispanics. So for that, I think programs need to be also be in place, especially for state contracts, for example. You know, we have the MBE program, and there's sub goals that are allocated to African American, Asian American, women-owned veterans, but there's nothing really there for Hispanics. So we planning to kind of work, lobby in, and go into Annapolis and try to change that, making sure that everybody's counted and included, and across the board, you know, not just the Hispanics but other groups. And if the growing population is really fast, especially in the Hispanic community, we need to make sure that we have the tools and the programs in place for opportunities for these small businesses that are out there. So I think it is important to make sure that you know, you also have something in place and not just talk about it, but also be able to provide these opportunities for the small businesses, in this case for the Hispanic community.
Thank you so much for that. The next question is for Betsy and Marco. So often when talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we focus largely on Black and white racial dynamics. How do you broaden the conversation to include Hispanic, LGBTQ, and the disabled, just to name a few?
You want me to start? I can start. Well, yeah, I think, like I said earlier, you know, I think diversity should be across the board, not just one group or two groups. It should be everybody. We all humans. We all, you know, are individuals with a lot of skills. Personally, I think on my professional career, I always felt that because I was Hispanic, you know, or the system made me feel like I was inferior, and I could never be good enough, and I had to work extra hard to be able to be there at the same level of others, and never said anything. You know, I felt like if I say anything, I'm gonna be marked, and my opportunity is probably gonna go away, and I'll be stuck down there, you know. So that's the kind of things you think about. But, you know, looking back and say, you know what, I think we need to say something. We need to talk, and we need to express our feelings and say, you know what, I'm just as good as you, as just as good at, you know, I have the same skills or better skills, or you know, and I can do the job better, you know. So it's very important to, like we mentioned earlier, to make sure we speak up, and we you know, talk about what we, you know, what we really feel, and that could actually get people aware of your real feelings, and change things, you know, for the future.
Thank you. Betsy, do you
You
have any
know,
perspective?
yeah, you know, Marco, when you started off with not good enough, having to work harder, boy, I think having grown up in a large Italian household with a middle brother who was a priest, that was woven into my fiber, especially, you know, being a woman, but especially when I came out to my family. Oh my God, it was hard. And people that know me now, I still wrestle with that. You know, I can do more, I can work harder. And I just, you know, when I think about having these conversations, you know, as an LGBT woman, I know my wounds really well, but you may not understand it because you've not lived it, as I haven't lived your journey. You know, and I think through the vulnerable conversations, we get a glimpse of another's experience. I'm sure, you know, you'd never think that the tears I would cry at a heterosexual wedding were really because I couldn't get married. And that went on for years. You know, people would think, like we all do, you know, you cry at weddings, but that wasn't what it was for me. It was because I wasn't good enough to be married. And my heart would break, yet I'd wipe away my tears, be appropriate, and focus on the two people who were being married. And I think we need to continue to create conversations that reach across all diverse groups, to see how we can leverage our knowledge base and influence to support each other. Because we know power comes in numbers. And when we band together, we can transform hateful conversations to acceptance. And I know, look, we have a long way to go. And some of this may not even happen in my lifetime, but I'm going to tell you, until I breathe my last breath, I'm not going to give up. And none of us should ever give up.
Thank you, and thank you both for, you know, sharing your stories just around the transparency and the feelings that are there when you are thinking about the things that you should champion and probably can't holistically doing, but working towards a cause to, you know, help us be more inclusive. So Betty, as the founding member of the Maryland LGBT Chamber, what did you experience in working with other business groups that led you to help organize this business group? So you shared a little bit of that, just about
Sure.
and, you know, what does that look like for you?
Well, having been in business for 30 years, I attended so many business networking meetings, and most of that time, I certainly did not disclose my LGBT status for fear of harassment. There were a few times when I tested the waters in conversations when someone, usually a man, would talk about his family, and I wanted to talk about mine. Yet there would typically be an inappropriate comment that would make me feel uncomfortable. I was even followed to my car one night. So, you know, and also over the years, I was president of a national women business owners group and was alienated by other business women once they found out I was gay. So by that time, I'm thinking, I'm in my own space with women and I'm being alienated. I'm done. So I fast forward to present day, and when our research in Maryland supported an interest to have an LGBT Chamber of Commerce, We wanted to provide an unconditionally safe place for the LGBTQ community and our allies to come together to do business. And it's an environment where none of us think twice about talking about our personal lives and talk about freedom. So the conversations are organic and welcoming, as they should be for every human being. And even now, my wife and I are cautious about holding hands out in public. And my response when she feels the discomfort is, if we hide it, we don't give people the opportunity to evolve where we are the norm. And our LGBT Chamber of Commerce is the norm.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I mean, I like how you've moved into the holistic approach, and then I like the fact that you said our conversations need to be organic and welcoming. So no one should hide who they are just to please other people.
Right.
Thank you for that. Ben Roy, just recently you spearheaded an effort at your firm to provide legal assistance to start-up Black businesses. As you interact with these businesses in the early stages, how are you directing them in the D&I effort so that it is a part of the culture early on as opposed to later?
Yeah, so I think this question actually piggybacks pretty nicely onto the questions that were previously asked. I think, one of the reasons why we started this initiative, quite frankly, is a recognition of the very specific history of African Americans in this country, and the racial dynamics that continue to confront so many Black business owners. And it's not just a matter of discomfort. It's also, we actually see in numbers, because of historical reasons, a lack of access to capital, lack of opportunities, despite the fact that there are, standards or whatever about utilizing African American businesses. We see those numbers are not met. And because of this issue of access to capital, once everything started happening with the protests, we thought it very important. Everyone was talking about trying to do social justice. And from my perspective, again, we have to dig deeper into just not trying to stop cops from shooting Black people, but to actually try to address some of the fundamental issues that lead us to where we are. And a lot of that is economic. And so the program that I initiated at the firm was out of a recognition of that reality, the reality being that Black businesses have less access to capital. Most businesses are funded by friends and family as their first round of funding, and Black businesses, because of historical reasons, don't have the same type of access to that kind of capital. And so what ends up happening is that many of these businesses, when they're starting up, as an attempt to try to save money, the little money that they do have, they end up trying to avoid costs, including not having an attorney help them on the front end. And so what inevitably happens, and I've seen this in my practice for years, that even those that are able to be successful, down the road, they come to an attorney and their organizational documents are messed up, or they find themselves in contracts that are not beneficial to them. And so we started the program to basically offer assistance on the front end, recognizing these issues with the problems with access to capital. And so from as a part of pitching it, it really is, on the front end, having to explain to the leaders at my firm, hey, it's great for us to want to address social injustice, and everybody understands that diversity is good and that's great. But how do we actually impact these companies so that they're in positions to be successful? And we have to talk about the historical context and why it is that these companies don't have access to capital. And we see this happening over and over and over again. I can't tell you how many stories I hear about people who have businesses but can't get access, or people aren't even looking to fund those kinds of companies. And so kind of making sure that you're framing the conversation on the front end. And quite frankly, it's sad to say, but the bad things that are happening in our society actually provided the lane to actually bring this up. I'm not sure that I would have been able to get this initiative passed without, George Floyd. That's terrible to say, but the reality is that very often for us to push on these diversity issues in ways that are really economic, we need really, really, really bad things to happen. And that's how I was able to get this initiative passed, where everyone has this heightened awareness about, oh, this is really, really an issue. So now let's try to fix it. And so trying to at least utilize those opportunities to try to bring about real systemic change. So our program allows us to assist Black-owned companies by providing pro bono legal assistance on the front end so that we can help them to essentially get off the ground. You know, just like any other business, they have to be, you know, a viable business, and they have to, you know, kind of make it on their own, but at least giving an opportunity to get to that position to get off of the runway.
All right, thank you. So, and you mentioned the part about you all helping small businesses on the front end so that they don't get into the legal troubles and be properly structured. So how might businesses, Ben Roy, support D&I and at the same time stay out of legal troubles so that it doesn't appear that they are favoring one group over another?
I mean, look, I think it actually goes back to a comment from Dr. Cheryl on the front end, right? This is really about trying to create opportunities so that you have various people who are able to be successful. And for far too long, if you just look at the numbers, right? I think the average Black-owned company has like, you know, 1/10 of the net worth of the average white-owned company. And so we also know that in these communities that, you know, there are, you know, many of these Black-owned companies tend to hire other Black individuals from those communities. And so if we're really talking about, we're not talking about trying to give a handout. We're talking about giving people an opportunity and allowing them to compete for the real positions that they have to be qualified to make or to accomplish. And too often, the issue is not that they're not qualified, is that they're not given an opportunity to compete. And if you can't get access to money and you can't get access to bid on things, then you cannot, then it's not that you're giving someone a handout, you're just giving them an opportunity to compete so we can actually recognize all of the opportunities and intelligence that is out there, right? And too often, you know, we see this over and over again. It's in these silos that you're staying in the communities that you're aware of, the people who you're aware of, people that look like you, people who you're familiar with, and those are people who you're going to for these bids, and those are the people you're giving money to. And so you miss out on this whole panoply of like other opportunities that might be out there and skills that are out there because of comfort. And as Dr. Cheryl indicated, we have to get to the point that we are getting ourselves out of these moments of comfort and getting comfortable with discomfort and recognizing that there are other demographics, other groups that are able, who have skilled professionals that are able to come up with ideas that might be the next big thing, but they've never been given the opportunity. So it's not a matter of trying to, you know, give anybody a hand. It's just about actually including others who have been historically excluded from opportunities.
Okay, thank you. And it's a good segue into the next question. So as we're nearing the end of the program, I would be remiss if we didn't touch briefly on social justice. So to any of the panelists, how do we use our individual skills and knowledge social justice? And I think, you know, Ben Roy, you've kind of just spoken on that. And if there's anything you want to add, feel free, but I open it up to all the panelists.
You know, go ahead.
Go ahead, Betsy, go ahead.
Okay. We really have to make sure within our organizations and how we conduct business, even outside of the organization, that we treat people fairly and we be the example of change that we want to experience. Interrupting inappropriate behavior isn't always the popular road to take, yet our job is to make social justice the norm. And, you know, what do you see everywhere now? If you see something, say something.
Thank you.
Betsy, you just said what I was going to say. Yeah, but you know, be truthful, say something, and get involved.
So I think it has to go a little bit deeper than that, right? Okay, it's not just about saying, like, the reality is that we have, as a society, for the most part, I mean, obviously there's still, you know, people who aren't socially aware enough of the fact that they're saying things that are overtly racist, sexist, or whatever, right? And so too often, you know, you're not gonna, I certainly am not running into many circumstances where it's overt, right? It's more, it's, again, I think we have to take that additional step to be much more mindful about going.
Hello. I think we lost him. Is he back? Okay. Dr. Moore Thomas, do you have anything you would like to share there?
I would, and thank you, thank you. For me, this whole idea of social justice is really about action and advocacy. And I certainly agree with everything that the panelists have said, the importance of being the change that we want to see, and if we see something, to say something. I'm also reminded of my own leadership and how I interact and move through those spaces, and taking a moment to reflect upon the ways in which my leadership opens and welcomes others, and the way in which I build barriers or close down those pieces. You know, you mentioned in my bio that I started in the classroom in public schools, and one of the questions that I always used to ask, it was certainly my aim that all of my students would benefit from my instruction, the kind of teacher that I was. But the challenge that I asked myself at the end of the day was, which student did I meet and which student did I close the door on? Unintentionally, but that was the reality of the way that I interacted. I think that we can move our organizations and our institutions forward if during our day we pause and ask, who did I welcome? Who did I help meet our goals and aims? And who did I inadvertently close that door on? And how can I open? How can I open that? How can I be more inviting? What I love about that question is it immediately calls us to action. And that action for me is tied really to an understanding of social justice and advocacy.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And as we close, if there was one piece of advice or one thing you would want everyone on the call to know today, to be aware of as it relates to diversity, what would it be? And I'll start back with you, Dr. Moore Thomas.
For me, it would certainly be what I talked about earlier, doing your own work.
Okay.
We've got to recognize that we're all accountable, that the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion is lifelong, that I certainly am enhanced and honored when you share your story, but it is not your responsibility to educate me and bring me along. I have to do that work because I value you and I value our work together. So in honor of you, I need to reach out and do my own work so that I can be a better business partner, a better colleague, a better teammate. Doing our own work is critically important.
Thank you. Marco?
I think short and sweet, get involved, make a difference, and you know, build relationships. As simple as that.
Betsy?
You know, and I'm saying this for the LGBT community, but it's really across the board. So something as simple as if someone makes a joke about the LGBT community or any diverse community, and and it could appear innocent, don't join in just to be included. Don't participate, and tell them the joke makes you feel uncomfortable. And that in itself may have the person think twice the next time they're compelled to make fun of someone who's different than themselves.
Thank you. Venro, are you back?
I am sorry. A couple
That's okay.
technical issues.
All right. And so we were at the last question. So what is one thing you would want everyone to walk away with today based on diversity and inclusion? What is one takeaway?
I think my takeaway is, again, not to just kind of think of diversity on kind of the surface level, but really to think about, dig deeper into how we are creating opportunities for people from different ethnic groups, from different, sexual orientations, from different gender groups, how we're making sure that we're providing opportunities for them to be successful.
All right. Thank you. So what we have is do your own work, especially in honor of others, get involved, make a difference, build relationships, speak up when people are being mistreated. When we say see something, say something, and then dig deeper. So I want to thank each of the panelists today for sharing their insight and wisdom, and just for getting on to have the courageous conversations for us to move forward. This is not a check the box exercise. What we have before us is work, as I think Bessie said, may extend beyond our lifetime here, but we're rolling up our sleeves to get the work done. I want to thank the Howard Chamber for allowing me to facilitate or moderate, and Loyola University for supporting us. And so without further ado, Leonardo, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Christie, and thank you to our panelists for just a great conversation. And actually, because we have just a minute, and this question is directed, we did have one question in the chat, and it's actually for Venroy. And the question is, where are the opportunities to invest in equal access to capital as individuals and organizations?
So I was actually about to type into the chat, but I guess since we're asking. So look, I think this is complicated, right? There are a variety of different organizations. Certainly, I know in Baltimore, there's social conscious venture labs. There are smaller funding organizations that are trying and being very thoughtful about getting access into companies that have historically not had access to capital, right? I mean, we have to think about that, right? Because the reality is that, and the fundamental issue is, all too often those big funding sources, they are looking for accredited investors, so there are limitations on who's going to actually be putting money into that, and they're not looking into some of these, companies that are are founded by diverse founders. And so I think we have to be very thoughtful about getting capital into those types of into some of those types of funds that are specifically focused on like social capital, and trying to be very thoughtful about investing in diverse companies. I know that, Accelerate Baltimore just did an announcement of a cohort of minority-owned companies that they are investing in. So there are organizations that are now trying to do some of that work. I think separately, I think there's also this big discussion around putting money into like Black-owned companies or CDFIs that are those are the banks that are going to actually lend into those organizations. And we know that these banks have struggled and have a hard time, historically. And so the more access to that kind of capital that's going to be looking into those communities and those neighborhoods in order to push funding out, I think those are all kinds of steps. But look, this is a complicated issue that people have been trying to figure out for decades now. So.
Excellent. Thank you. And so, Venroy, I think there are a couple of people that will be facilitating some email introductions offline over to you to assist there. I'm going to, as we prepare to wrap up, want to just thank everyone for joining us today, and hopefully this has been an enlightening conversation and given you some things to think about. Again, I want to thank our participating organizations in the Maryland LGBT Chamber, Commerce, the Business Women's Network of Howard County, the Asian American Chamber of Commerce, the Maryland Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Visit Howard County, and certainly our sponsor in Loyola University of Maryland, the Sellinger School of Business. Again, thank you. Just a few parting shots before we wrap up. And the first is I want to also acknowledge overall the Chamber's 2020 annual partners. These companies and organizations have been a tremendous supporter of the Chamber this year, and truly with everything that has taken place related economically to COVID-19, we would not have made it without these companies and organizations. And so thank you for your support. The next thing I want to point out, just some upcoming events that I think would be of particular interest. The first is next week is our executive speaker series. And so we'll have a great panel discussion talking about the impact of COVID-19 on healthcare. And so again, that is something as we start entering this open enrollment season for small business owners and business managers, certainly everyone is looking at what is healthcare going to cost, you know, and what changes might be in place. And so you'll hear both a hospital perspective, a physician's perspective, as well as an insurance perspective. And so that's next week on the 22nd. Also on the 24th, for those of you that might be government contractors or that serve them, we've got our Scale Up webinar, which is on how to create, which is on mergers and acquisition and how to create value in an uncertain economy. And then lastly, we will also wrap up the end of the month with our Biz Breakfast as we talk about building a competitive marketing strategy. Again, this is for our government contractors. And then certainly the save the date for coming up in October. And this is where the Chamber will once again partner with Howard County Executive Calvin Ball, as well as our Economic Development Authority, to host the County Executive's 2020 Small Business Series. So this is a follow-up as to last year's Business Summit, but again, we can't meet all in large groups. So we're gonna break this up into morning sessions from 9:30 to 12. So we'll give you enough time to get the kids on the computer, and then we'll also then be able to, from there, go into a little bit of business development, and then get back off in enough time to fix them lunch. And so, so again, that's going to be October 7th, the 14th, and 21st. And actually, now that I look at these dates, I think these might actually be on Wednesdays, and so maybe that helps us out all, and that's the asynchronous day, as we've all learned in our new school vernacular over the last few weeks. But again, more details are on our website, and we thank our premier sponsor there in KCI. And so lastly, just something that I'll share, and I think it was Dr. Moore Thomas that touched on the fact that, again, this is work that won't end, and it's certainly something we'll have to continuously do in terms of just being advocates really for just people. But the one thing that I want everyone on here, as you look at your screen, and particularly those that you can see the actual video participants, the one thing that I took away also was that this conversation really needs to evolve beyond just people that have been traditionally disenfranchised. If you look here, for the most part, outside of the panelists and maybe two others, it's all this, the attendance of our group has all been women, as well as African Americans, people of Asian descent, maybe different sexual orientations, but we've got to have more men in the conversation, and to be even more specific, we've got to have more white men in the conversation. And so that's the way in which we truly effect changes, when everyone is here talking, having dialogue, that it can't just be about the traditional diversity, equity, and inclusion enthusiasts and so forth. So with that, I thank you all for coming out, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.